Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute, and with me is Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems.
Do you want to sell more? Of course you do. That's why you listen to this podcast. The question is, do you sell scientifically? That's a pretty good question, and I'm not sure if I could answer yes to it. But this episode's guest will be able to help us find an answer and a better way to sell. So put on your white lab coat as Scott and I discuss Selling More with Science with author and sales trainer David Hoffeld on episode 524 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
So as we do normally when we have a guest, there's no book club, but keep up with the book, How Clients Buy. We're going to be covering part 2, chapters 5, 6, and 7. I know 3 chapters. I know you can handle it. We're going to be picking that up next week. But this week, we're going to be talking with David Hoffeld. But before we do that, let's hear a message from BusyWeb, a growth, marketing, and sales enablement agency.
This is Dave Meyer with BusyWeb, a proud supporter of the Winning at Selling podcast. BusyWeb is a growth marketing and sales enablement agency in Minneapolis. If you need help driving leads to your biz, check us out at busyweb.com. That's BIZZYWEB.com. This week's tip, get a sales partner to help you grow. Sales for most businesses requires a steady stream of leads. And of course, leads can be tough to come by. Many successful sales teams have looked to online marketing to help drive new business. The right online partner can create content designed to attract new sales from search engines, both via advertising and SEO or search engine optimization. Truly great partners take it a step beyond clicks and automatically engage people who search for you through automated emails and notify sales when visitors show interest. For help driving new leads to your business, visit busyweb.com. That's BIZZYWEB.com for a special Winning at Selling offer. Or give us a call at 612-4BUSY-O. That's 612-424-9990. Generate buzz without getting stung.
Well, Scott, we're real excited to have David with us today. David is the CEO and Chief Sales Trainer at the Hoffeld Group, one of the nation's top research-backed sales training and consulting firms, and the author of the best-selling book, The Science of Selling. And I did read that book, really enjoyed it. He's a sought-after sales thought leader and speaker. He's worked with clients ranging from small and medium-sized businesses to Fortune 500 companies. He's based in the Twin Cities, where Scott and I are. And we first met him when he presented to the Professional Sales Association for us a couple of years ago. It was just a great presentation. So now we're excited to have him on the podcast to discuss his new book, Sell More with Science. Welcome, David.
Thank you so much, Bill and Scott. It's great to be with you.
Yeah. Great seeing you again, and excited about hearing about your new book and looking through it. Thanks for the copy. It's just fascinating how you really add a very scientific approach to sales, and it really, I think, appeals to that logical mind that salespeople have, and how they can get a really firm structure on the behavior and the mindset and implement it in the behavior that they end up doing professionally.
Yeah, that's what I found as well. And that's kind of what we focus on in the book. It's titled Sell More with Science. And that's really what it's focused on. My first book, we really dived into the buying process and what does science say regarding how our brains form buying decisions. And in this book, I turned my attention on to us as sellers and what does science say will make a profound impact in our ability to produce more sales. And the good news is, there is a lot of research. I think in the book, we cite specifically almost 500 different scientific studies in the book. So it is, there's a wealth of research out there on this really important and mission critical topic.
It's a 40-page bibliography, David. How am I going to look up all of this stuff? I mean, it's a wealth of information.
I just trust David on it. He did the looking up. I just have to know
great.
That he did.
All good stuff.
That's right. Well, it's really interesting because I think so many people get into sales thinking it's just, well, let's just be nice and, kind of a little bit pushy and things will happen. And they don't realize that it is a profession. It is something you have to study. It's something you have to think about. And things we were just reading about in Why Clients Buy as that book started was there's very few colleges that teach selling because it's beneath them. And I see that changing a little bit, but I think it is a profession. So, recently Scott and I have worked with clients, and what they're asking us to do is help them find and hire salespeople. What are the traits you think we're looking for, or we should help them look for in these candidates rather than just a good talker, which is what we used to hire?
Yeah. Someone who had that old gift of gab, right? That's what we used to look for. Yeah.
He'll be good in sales. He can talk to anybody.
That's right. Yeah.
He's a people person.
He can put a sentence together. Let's bring him on. And there's a couple of things. One thing that's really interesting that we talk about in the book that really blew me away, actually, with how much research there is on it, is the trait of grit. So grit is sticking with a goal and continuing to work on it even when things get tough. And the reason I mention grit is there's been a number of real scientific studies published in scientific journals where they measured the grit of sales people. And what they found is that it predicts retention rates. So when you bring a new hire on, will they stick with it through the new hire training, which can be challenging to learn something new? And then even for the first 6 months to a year, if you're going to invest in a person, will they stick with it? Grit predicts that almost better than anything else. So the trait of grit, and it also, equally importantly, predicts who will become a top performer, because you need to be gritty to survive in sales and to thrive in sales. And so if we're looking for those who are gritty individuals, it will make a profound difference and allow us to kind of forecast accurately whether or not they're going to stick with the organization and stick with sales in general, because the grit seems to make a big difference in that area. And there's now a number of studies that have confirmed that.
Yeah, interesting. One of the things we find often is when clients ask us to do this is that they always want to hire somebody with experience in the marketplace. And what I tell them, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, or what we tell them is, well, then that means you're going to find somebody who's been fired by your competition and for not being able to sell. So if you looked at the number one thing you can teach them is how to sell your particular product. Look for somebody, as you said, with grit or the right character traits, and then teach them how to sell your product. I don't know if that's right or not.
No, I would agree, because I think if you only look for someone with experience, you're looking for experience, depending on the industry. That's certainly a factor you might want to pay attention to. But what's more important is certain mindsets and certain traits like grit. They're far more predictive. In other words, someone with a lot of experience, low grit, and someone with no experience, high levels of grit. You want to choose the no experience, high grit person all day long, because what the science overwhelmingly shows, we're not talking about one study or 10 studies. We're talking now about hundreds of studies that have proven this will set them up, and you as a sales leader or as an organization, up for long-term success. So it really gives you insight on, who do I want to invest into? What kind of ROI am I going to get from this person? And so grit, far more important, no comparison, even when you look at something like experience.
Yeah, I had a boss who used to say that ignorance on fire is a lot better than knowledge on ice.
That's very good. It's a good one, Bill.
Scott, you had a thought.
Yeah, I'm curious, David. You talk about grit. How do you train people to be gritty, or how do you assess to see if they've got any grit?
Yeah, there's a number of ways you can do it. In the book, actually, we have a whole little assessment tool that the reader can go through to really get an accurate assessment of if he or she has grit, or you can also use it when you're hiring people as well. But the good news is, for all of us, this is a trait that can be strengthened. So whether you say, you know what, I have some grit, but I could use some more, or I have a high level, but how do I get even more? Or I don't have much at all, what can I do about it? There are specific things you and I can do to foster deeper levels of grit, and that's going to set all of us up for more success. One thing you can do is, when you're pursuing a goal or an objective, think through why that matters. There's been a number of studies that look specifically at this and found that when you qualify essentially your goals or objectives, and you say, okay, why does this matter to me? When you identify a strong why, when the going gets tough, and it often will when you're trying to achieve something worthwhile, and there's resistance, you're going to default to that. You can remind yourself of that why, because you've already thought through it and you've taken that time. And that's going to often give you that little extra push that you need. And oftentimes, as anyone who's achieved anything can relate to. It's that little extra push that often makes the difference. So have a strong why. And if you say, well, David, I'm pursuing something right now and I've thought about it, I don't have a strong why. That can often be helpful too, to say, okay, do I really want to invest my time and resources into pursuing this if it really doesn't matter to me? So that can be helpful as well, even if you don't have it, because you want to choose what you invest in. So having strong whys can really be helpful. And the second thing I think is also a little bit of a mindset that helps to really foster grit is that recognizing that the price of success is always paid for upfront. And this really helped me. I know when I was originally conducting my research, this mindset, and I've shared it with others, and there's a number of studies that confirm this as well. When you go into something challenging, expect it will be challenging, right? Don't expect it's going to be easy, because things just aren't when you're pursuing something that matters. And so there's a price you have to pay for success. And that price is paid in hard work and dedication and investing in resources into this objective or goal, and realize that's the price of success. And you always pay it up front. And so if you want to achieve something, you got to go in with that mindset. And I found that makes you more resilient when you expect, okay, this is going to be challenging, but I'm ready for it. I'm prepared. It's when we go in with our eyes shut and we get caught off guard that oftentimes we can get knocked off course, and later on we regret it. And that's the one thing, people, that when we compromise in this area, or we don't embrace grit or really foster it or keep it as a focus, is that when you don't do that, it almost always produces regret. It's that, oh, I wish I would have, or I could have, or I should have, that we look back on our life. Oftentimes, if we have that grit, it sets us up for long-term success. And so those are just two simple things that science has proven can make even though they're simple, make a profound difference in how gritty you and I become.
I know you talked in the book about the marshmallow experiment, which I find to be very fascinating, about when they asked children to resist eating a marshmallow, and if they could resist long enough, they'd get an extra one to eat later, and how that predicted success. I think that's fascinating. Are there other ways that we can predict success? And what I'm thinking about, I have a friend of mine who hires leaders in the accounting field, and he would prefer to have B and C students who paid their own way through college versus A students who were there on a scholarship for the same kind of gritty things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
They learned how to work, they learned how to fail, they learned how to push through those situations. So I wonder if there's other things, maybe you want to talk about the marshmallow experiment a little bit, but other things that could predict a winner.
Yeah, well, that delayed gratification that the marshmallow experiment teaches us, and there's so many studies that have been based off of that as well, that have shown that the ability to delay gratification, in other words, to go through something challenging to get something good later on. And that's hard for all of us, because we all want to do things that are easy. But I think, at least for me, the older I get, the more, when I look back over my life, the things that I took the easy way out on, I'm like, well, that really didn't matter or produce the result. The things that were hard are the things you're proud of, the things that make a difference in your life. And so there's a lot. And so one way, to your point, that you can begin to analyze, do I have grit? Or when I'm interviewing someone, perhaps, do they have grit? Again, we have questions in the book, but one thing is to look at, have they demonstrated grit in the past? Meaning, if you are gritty, you act in ways that are consistent with that. And so do they, when an obstacle comes up, do they push through? And so asking someone, can you share with me a time in your professional life when there was an obstacle that came up, and what you did you overcome it? And if so, how? Specifics. Because you can't fake, if you ask someone, are you gritty? They go, you've never met anyone as gritty as me. But when you say, well, share with me a specific time, an obstacle, and what you did, and you ask them for specifics, that you can't fake. And so if people struggle to come up with, boy, when I run into obstacles, I often shrink back, or I often look for the easy way out. Okay, that's a red flag. And if that's someone that's listening right now, I'll go, boy, David, that kind of describes me. The good news is you can improve in this area. You're not born with a high or a low level of grit, right? This is something you can acquire, you can develop. And so one also thing I'll share about grit that's really interesting too is, not only is it about being persistent, but it's about following your passions. And this is interesting. There's a lot of fascinating research on this, that when you follow something or you pursue something you're passionate about, you get into what they call flow state. And this is where time kind of ceases to exist. If you've ever been in a situation where time slows down, and maybe you think about when you were in school and you're like, feels like it's been 4 hours, and you look up and it's been 4 minutes, and you're like, well, that's the opposite. All of us can also relate to something we're doing where time goes by. I know when I'm oftentimes doing training, I have to, especially I'm better at it now, but earlier in my career, I would go for 2 or 3 hours without giving people bathroom breaks because it felt like 20 minutes to me. And they're like, David, we got to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, it's only been a few minutes. And they're like, it's been 2.5 hours, you know, I'm like, oh, wow. So I had to carry a watch. I have it right in front of me the whole time. I'm a little better now, but that's because I got in that flow state and it just naturally flowed out. And what science shows is when you are doing something you're passionate about, number one, you're naturally more gritty. And number two, you are focused on it. You want to get better at it. You want to develop yourself in that area. You like to think about it, meaning it's more than just a job. It's kind of who you are. It's what you enjoy doing. And that also has been shown to naturally foster deeper levels of grit and also give you a more enjoyable, work experience and life in general. So following your passions or looking for that flow state. So when you look at when does time, I just don't have a good sense of it because I'm so taken by what I'm doing that I lose track of time. You want to pursue that. So think about that. And you want to get more of that because when you do, often too, when you get in that flow state, you're at your peak, you're at your best. You naturally are in that positive frame of mind. And it makes you just more gritty, more resilient, and more enjoyable as well.
So you talked a little bit about passion, David, and that's emotional, and that's a why, and that's emotional. And in working with salespeople, I totally agree with you. You have to have a why, and you have to have a why that is focused on the sense of achievement and what is working on accomplishments and working on your career. I know some salespeople that their why is I got to pay the rent, I got to pay the mortgage. And they come across as being desperate. And that follows the same philosophy of that's my why, or the why is I'm saving up for a cabin or I want to get a bigger boat. I mean, that's another why. And that's passionate as well, and determination and having that grit. In the book, you talk about two mindsets, and you kind of alluded to this earlier on how important mindset are. Could you talk a little bit about the two mindsets that successful salespeople have?
Yeah, this was interesting. It's kind of how I start the book out in chapter 1, looking at there's a wealth of scientific research on this. And I think all of us realize how much mindsets matter. Like we're like, of course they matter. But what the science shows is, at least this is what struck me, they matter more than I thought. I mean, they are foundational. So if you don't have the right mindsets, it corrupts your behaviors. It sets you up for really failure or mediocrity. And if you do have the right mindsets, it just gives you such a significant advantage in today's marketplace. And so the first mindset we talk about is what's called the achievement mindset. And there is over 40 years of research on this, thousands of studies, and that says your belief in your ability to produce a desired outcome is predictive of whether or not you actually do that. And so if you believe you can do something, you're more likely to. And if you say, I can't do that, well, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy and you're probably right? You'll limit yourself. So it's almost like a mental thermostat, I call it. You kind of set, how high can I go? It's a self-imposed ceiling. And oftentimes, all of us can relate to this where we surprise ourselves by what we achieve, or something unexpected happens. We respond in an unpredictable way. And afterwards, we're like, whoa, I didn't think I can even do that. And it kind of breaks us through that ceiling. And so that achievement mindset is very important. It's easy to overlook, but there are specific things you and I can do to improve in that area, such as number one, like challenging ourselves. People that have strong achievement mindsets, they're not sitting in front of the mirror all day saying, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it. That doesn't do much of anything. But what they do is they constantly are presenting small challenges to themselves. They're trying to move that thermostat, that mental thermostat, you raise that ceiling. And so they earn it. And that's what the science shows, is that people that have this strong achievement mindset earn their confidence. They don't try to convince themselves they're good at something when they're not. They say, okay, I need to get better at closing, but I can do it. Now, what resources do I need? Who do I need to talk to? So it's this belief that, hey, I can do this. And then they start asking how. And they're pushing forward, but they're challenging themselves. And then they earn their success. And with each small success, they raise that mental ceiling they believe they can do. Another one is being very mindful of negativity. And as we all know in sales, negativity, when that creeps in, it always corrupts sales results. So being very, very mindful, especially of the way we talk to ourselves, the self-talk, which is easy to overlook because it seems like, well, yeah, I guess it matters, but it matters a lot. And sometimes even using one word like yet. So in other words, if you're, let's say, man, I'm really struggling with closing. I'm not good at closing yet.
Yeah.
Even just opening your mind to that. There's scientific studies on that word done by Carol Dweck out of Stanford that shows just inserting that word into a statement like, I'm not good at closing yet. All of a sudden it opens your mind to now, okay, I can be, right? I'm a human being. I can learn how to do almost anything. What steps do I need to take to become skilled at closing? And that shift versus saying, I'm not good at that, or, so-and-so is better than me at this, and that's just how it is. Whereas when you insert that simple word of yet, it's empowering. And now it raises the question, what do I need to do? So achievement mindset is just one of those mindsets that, boy, if you have that, it matters a lot. And the second mindset, real quickly, is what's called a growth mindset. This one, there's so much research on, it's just overwhelming now. And that's the idea that our sales ability is like a muscle that can be continually developed. And people that have a growth mindset are just so much more likely to experience success in sales. A number of studies have shown that at a 2-to-1 ratio, they outperform those who have the opposite mindset, which is more of a fixed mindset. That says that either you have sales ability or you don't. There's not much you can do. You have the gift of gab or you don't. And the results they produce is night and day difference. And it sets them up for long-term success. And just like that achievement mindset, there are specific things you and I can do to grow our growth mindset. And when you focus on that, it really just sets you up for an amazing amount of success long-term throughout your career.
Oh, excellent, man. This is great stuff. And before we get into the later parts of the book, we want to hear from our sponsor, AJ Imholt, a financial advisor dedicated to salespeople.
As a salesperson, you have enough to deal with. Prospects hang up on you, clients skip meetings, slow responses to your emails. It's enough to drive you bonkers. Fortunately, you can take control of your financial future. Your time is at a premium, and you want to focus on finding new clients and growing the customers you already have. So it's best to work with someone who takes the time to build an understanding of what you have on your plate. I'm AJ Imholt of Fortune Financial, and this is where I come in. As a financial advisor dedicated to salespeople, my goal is to help manage your portfolio so you can focus on what matters. Then, I'll take care of the boring details while you go out and crush your numbers. You can schedule a time to chat with me using the bookings link in the show notes. Good luck out there, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
AJ Imholt is a registered representative and investment advisor representative of Security Financial Services, Inc. Securities and investment advisory services offered through Security Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Northstar Resource Group is independently owned and operated. Fortune Financial is affiliated with Northstar Resource Group and is independently owned and operated.
David, later in the book, you get into selling methodologies. Chapter 1, I found fascinating on the reframing. Can you tell us why it's important and how to get it done better?
Yeah, reframing is one of those mission critical sales skills, isn't it? That it helps people. Reframing is you're helping someone see something from a new, more beneficial perspective for both you and, more importantly, for them. And this is something that great salespeople often will figure out over a career. They don't know how they do it. They're just able to do it. And so what I wanted to do was look at the science. And this took about 3.5 years. These things take a bit of time, reading a lot of research and trying to say, okay, how does reframing actually occur? And is there a model we could create that would allow someone to skill up in this area in a matter of hours instead of a matter of decades? And so what we were able to put together was, I think, pretty revolutionary. It's a way of looking at reframing, and that makes it very simple to execute on. And why this matters so much, I think, is best summed up by a Nobel Prize winning cognitive psychologist who I quote in the book, Daniel Kahneman, who says that all of us are our perceptions are frame bound rather than reality bound. In other words, the way, the perspective, the frame we're using to view something, and our potential clients are the same way, heavily shapes how we respond to it more than reality does. And so this is really a key. So when, and salespeople, we know this already, right? Because you have met with people as a sales professional who thought one way. And after you talk with them and presented the information and you help them see things in a new, more empowering, more beneficial way, and they said, I hadn't thought about that before. I think I will move forward with something like that. Right. That's what selling is. And so how do we get good at helping people see things from a new perspective? And that's what we talk about in the book. So what we do is we lay out 5 specific frames that science has proven over and over and over again are highly influential. And once you understand these 5, it takes it from either mimicking someone's reframe, like, hey, I like what you said, I'll try to say that if I get in that exact situation. It allows you to innovate in the moment because you play in these 5 buckets, if you will, these 5 frames, and you think about, okay, which of these 5 would be most applicable in this situation? And I found with about an hour or 2 of practice, it allows someone who might be new to sales to become skilled at reframing, equal to someone who through just trial and error over a decade or 2 was able to get to that same place. So in hours, we can do what happened in decades. Why? Because we're using science, and we're using this model of reframing that's backed by decades of science and allows us to have transparency. What is happening when we reframe something? We know that, and allows us to really simply do it. And it's really, I'm really excited about it because I've seen just the results it produces over the number of years I've been teaching it. And I was so excited to put that in this book. I wanted to put it in the Science of Selling, but I wasn't done the research on it yet. And so it didn't make it in the book. So this one, I was like, I've got to put this in. So I put it in right in the middle of the book. And I think it's one of the most powerful chapters in the book.
No, excellent. And I would say if you want to learn how to sell better, get this book because I've really enjoyed it. I've read a lot of sales books. First of all, David, I think you're very approachable with the science. It's not sciencey, but it is fact-based, and it's also just fascinating ideas that we can use right away. One last question as we run out of time here. We're always told, think outside the box, but we don't always know how to do it. Fortunately, you have some ideas on how we can sell outside the box. So give us a few of those as we wrap up today.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 real quickly here, rapid fire. One is kind of counterintuitive, that there's a number of studies that have found something called the blemishing effect. And that is when you share a piece of negative information about your product or service and you share it in the right way, it actually improves buying behavior, which is really interesting because oftentimes as sales professionals, we only want to say good things about our product and service. And of course, we wouldn't say anything bad or negative. And science shows there's a time when you can do that. Now, there's a couple parameters we need to be aware of before people run out and start talking trash about what they sell. The first thing is you need to have a good understanding of your potential client. You need to know what matters to them. But what the research shows is that when you share something that your product isn't effective at or service isn't that great in, that isn't one of their buying motivators. Right. It's not motivating that buying decision. It makes the good information shine even brighter, number one. And number 2, it inspires deep levels of trust because they feel like, okay, you're being really honest. You're not just presenting this so it sounds too good to be true. You're being real with them. You're being authentic. And third, what it does is it helps people feel that they have a good, accurate understanding of what you're presenting to them. So it makes everything you're sharing more trustworthy as well. And so the blemishing effect is one way that we can share something negative and get a positive response. The second one is something we talk about a lot in selling, but boy, does it matter, especially when you look at the science, and that is our nonverbal behaviors. This is very predictive of heightened levels of sales performance and effective sales presentation. The number one thing I found, and we talk about this in the book, about how to, with eye contact or smiling or gestures or voice inflections, which are really powerful. The number one thing is a lack of awareness is your biggest problem when it comes to nonverbal behavior. Most of us are so focused on our words, as we should be when we're selling, that we are totally ignorant of the nonverbals we're communicating. And even if you're selling over the phone, your voice inflections, your pauses, all this matters a lot. And so you want to be hyper-focused on the way you're presenting. And one great way to do that is to record yourself. Now, if you can do that with a client and view it or listen to it, great. If you're not able to do that with a client, just recording your presentation when you present to a colleague or even by yourself, and then just analyze, what are my nonverbals communicating? Oftentimes they'll conflict with the message. In other words, we'll present in ways that lack confidence clearly, but our words are conveying confidence. So that creates distrust. So really, having an awareness of how you're communicating nonverbally is the number one thing you can do to easily improve in that area. Lack of awareness is your biggest problem. So once you start focusing on some of these nonverbal communication, it makes it instantly better because you'll see things. You're like, oh, I didn't realize I did that with my eyes darting, or I didn't realize I'm scowling the whole time, or when my voice inflections are almost non-existent on this part of my presentation, or whenever I talk about this, I don't make good eye contact. I didn't realize that. Exactly. So once you get that awareness, then it's easy to fix. When you're looking for the problem, you're going to see it. It's just the problem with nonverbals is we don't usually look, and as a result, we don't find what we should see.
Right. I got one last question, David. I usually ask all of our guests when they're on the show, who has had the greatest impact on your life, or what has had the greatest impact, or a book or an author or speaker?
That's a great question. I would say for me, something I mentioned in this book as well. I was given a book when I was 10 years old by my mother called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And it's a book that so many millions and millions of people have read. But I remember that influenced me because as a 10-year-old kid, a shy child, I read this book and it was like learning how a magician's trick worked. It was like, whoa, okay, there's influence, which I didn't understand at all, seemed predictable all of a sudden. And as I read this, it was like, wow, simple things can predict positive responses from other people. And I remember just being fascinated with this book and reading it and rereading it throughout my teens. And especially when I got my first job, I would use some of the principles I learned to deal with angry customers and things. They always said, let David talk to the angry customers, because I would just do what Dale Carnegie said in the book. I never got defensive. I would just agree with them. And it's hard to yell at a 16-year-old kid when he agrees with you. It's like, oh, well, people calm down. And they're like, how do you do that? I'm just like, well, I'm just doing what Dale Carnegie said to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that book, though, kind of helped me see influence at a young age. And it really appealed to me. And later on, it kind of helped me get into sales. But it was I think that initial exposure to that book in particular that really impacted me and set me up for the career and the life I now have.
Yeah, one of the top three of the personal development books in the world, right? And one of the originators of it, right?
Yes.
That and Napoleon Hill and Norman Vincent Peale.
Yes.
Really,
ahead of its time for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely, great.
Yeah.
Well, David, we want to hear about your book, so tell people where they can get it, and then also any other resources, maybe your website, whatever else you want to make available to our readers. We'll put it on our landing page.
Sure. So my newest book, Sell More with Science, is available on Amazon or really anywhere fine books are sold. You can pick a copy up, and then you can check out our website, Hoffeld, Hoffeld group.com. There's a lot of resources on there, white papers, articles, blog posts, podcasts, all available at no cost. You can learn more about how you can apply really practical, easy to understand science to improve your sales outcomes. And then I have a podcast as well called The Science of Selling, and you consume that wherever you check out great podcasts like this one.
Well, David, thanks a lot for being on the show. Scott, any last words you want to say?
No, I loved it. High energy. I think it really adds a lot of scientific foundation to the activity of selling. And I think a lot of people need to be able to have the proof before they apply the behavior.
All right. So, Scott, let's wrap it up with your golden nugget, your quote.
Our golden nugget is, there is one quality which one must possess to win, and that is the definiteness of purpose, the knowledge of what one wants, and the burning desire to possess it, by Napoleon Hill. And those three fundamentals, I think, are some of the foundations of some of the things that David talked about.
I think he was talking about those three things to establish grit.
Yeah.
When things aren't going well, those were three of the things that he talked about. So great quote and really appropriate for the conversation. Go to winningatselling.com. All the information, the links that David mentioned will all be there. winningatselling.com.
Next week, we're going to be talking about selling a price increase. And again, the book club, How Clients Buy, Part 2, Chapters 5, 6, and 7. And Bill and I are asking for your help in growing our downloads to over 12,000 per month by the end of September. Our last numbers for June were just over 11,500. If you find the podcast helpful, then share it with your friends, colleagues, and put it on your social media, and connect with Bill and I on LinkedIn.
Go out and get better, one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.